Hello and welcome to the Raw podcast brought to you by the Sunderland Echo. James and Phil here to discuss Sunderland's win against Birmingham City at the Stadium of Light, but we're also going to give you our season review so far. We'll come on to that. We're heading into an international break though, Phil, and I haven't actually asked you this yet, but is the football manager career developing now the 2024 game's out? How's that going?
Yes, it is. Yeah. So I'm at Accrington Stanley. We won the League Two title in our first year, won the Pizza Cup in our second year, and we've just won League One in our third year. So our march to the Premier League is well and truly underway. I'm loving it, to be fair. It's a great addition this year.
Can you manage Sunderland, or is it too close to home for you?
No, because it feels a bit too much like work, and also I feel bad if I drop a solid player or something.
I know.
So yeah, no, I can't do it. I get no joy from managing Sunderland, unfortunately.
See, I can't manage anybody else until I have completed Sunderland and restored them to their former glories in the English First Division and have had them win a Champions League. I can't do anything else until I've done that, and I'm miles off that at the moment.
It is. The good thing about Sunderland is it is fun at the moment, isn't it? And you've got all the young players and stuff.
Yes.
It's a good football. Even for the neutrals, I imagine Sunderland would be a good save. But yeah, that's probably enough football manager chat. There'll be a lot of people absolutely
rolling their eyes.
Fuming. Yeah.
Right, Birmingham City, Sunderland went 1-0 up. Then there was an equaliser, and then Sunderland ended up winning 3-1. Bit of a shaky sort of 20 minutes in the first half, but Sunderland rallied. There was lots of disruption before the match as well, with Serkin pulling out with an injury, Nectar Triantis and Jensen Sealed both coming in for their first starts in the Championship. Less than ideal situation, but Sunderland coped well, I thought, by the end of the game, and an important 3 points on the board, Phil.
Yeah, it was a really good win when you put it into context, like you say. I think if you'd said, because of 09 and Ballard's suspension, I think if you'd said to any Sunderland fan before the game, it might not be convincing, but you'll get the 3 points, I think you would have snapped the hand off for it, because to lose your two centre halves is a big thing. And then to lose, because we all thought Serkin was going to come in, and that gave us some comfort because we know how good a player he is. So then lose Serkin a couple of minutes before kickoff, you would have said before the game, just get the job done. So it was a big win for Sunderland that they did that. Really good game and a really interesting game, because it was just completely unlike what we're used to seeing at the Stadium of Light. And that, Wayne Rooney's obviously been appointed and being told that he has to implement this no fear front foot approach. That's the reason why they sacked, John Eustace, even though the results were pretty good. But of course, what we've seen is that's not the way to play against the Sunderland side, because if you leave them space and it becomes a basketball game, more often than not, Sunderland will come out on top. And even though Birmingham threatened throughout and could have scored more goals, you always felt that no matter how many goals ended up going in, Sunderland were always going to come up about on the right side. How many teams leave Jack Clarke that much space at the Stadium? Very few. And even though it's painful,
it was insane the amount of space he had at times.
Yeah, it was borderline crazy, and I sort of respected it and enjoyed it, and thought Rooney spoke well. He's a very good talker and a very interesting fella. After the game, and I think he'll get some good results there, because I liked a lot of what they saw. But unfortunately for us who go and watch Sunderland supporters and journalists and what have you, there's a reason why teams come and take time out of the game, defend the deny space for the wingers, because unfortunately it's the best way to play against Sunderland. And so I wish every game at the Stadium was like that, but it ain't going to be the case, because ultimately I think we saw why more teams don't do that. But I don't want to sound like I'm taking away from Sunderland, because especially with the disruption in defence, it was a really important win and a really good win, because Birmingham have got good players, and they will take points off teams this season. So yeah, always nice to win before the international break, and I think especially go back into the playoffs, because if you think that this block of fixtures started with the Stoke defeat off the back of the Middlesbrough defeat, it felt like a bit of momentum had lost. So I think a lot of credit to Mowbray and the players. They've really steadied the ship, and ultimately they're where they need to be right now.
We'll quickly whiz through a few talking points from the game. What did you make of Sunderland's centre-back pairing of Sealt and Triantis? Obviously, Triantis, a late addition to the side. Sealt was expecting to play with Serkin. They'll have trained for that scenario all week. I thought, to be honest, that they grew into the game in the second half. It was by no means a perfect performance from either of them. You could tell that both were sort of learning on the job. But it was a bizarre game in a sense that I felt like Sunderland's midfield of Neil and Ekwa gave the ball away fairly often, and that caused a little bit of pressure on Sunderland centre-backs at times, which ultimately they did deal okay with in the end. But it sort of felt like that sort of centre-back to midfield combination was a little bit disjointed, as you'd expect maybe.
Yeah.
We didn't really have somebody bringing the ball out like a Luke O'Nien, and that caused a few issues in that little gap between.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was disjointed at times, and you could tell that natural link up that's developed between O'Nien and Neil, O'Nien and Ekwa and Ballard was disjointed. And I think partially that may have been why Birmingham decided to take the approach that they did as well. I think they would have played like that anyway, but maybe Rooney, sensing that possible disruption, was doubly aggressive and saying that there might be opportunities here. I actually thought Seal and Trent, you saw from both of them there's quality there, especially in possession. Seal played a couple of gorgeous big switches, and immediately you can go, okay, this guy can handle the ball. This guy's going to fit in this team. Where he probably struggled was that sometimes he thought he had a second more than he actually had. I think I think that's fair to say, and that's just a process, isn't it? Ideally, you would never ever want to put them both in the team together for their debuts for that exact reason, that they're both going through that learning process. And Mowbray was speaking to us afterwards, wasn't he, and saying that Seal, he is obviously centre half, but when Ballard and O'Nien are both fit and available, there's a chance Seal will play a little bit and hold him midfield, maybe a right back and roll into midfield as Hume does. And I think you can definitely see that, can't you? You can definitely see that he's got a lot of calm on the ball. He's willing to be brave. Listen, I don't think there's any doubt it's going to be O'Nien and Ballard for the Plymouth away, isn't it, on the 25th of November? They're clearly at this point in their careers further ahead. But that was a big game for both of them, because I think next time there's an injury or a suspension, we won't be talking about playing players sort of half out of position. I think Mowbray knows he can trust those guys now, and that's really good for them.
Other end of the pitch, Rusin looked really impressive, worked really hard, gets the assist for the first goal, and hits the outside of the post as well. It's great to see a striker sort of claiming that space, but the same volition, it's so sort of infuriating is the wrong word, but frustrating, because we just want a striker to sort of take hold at the Stadium of Light and catch fire. And he has to a degree, but we just want that goal, don't we?
Yeah, and I thought Meander and Bairstow both looked excellent when they came on as well.
They did.
And there's a lot of
unlucky
optimism.
Not to score.
Yeah, it was interesting seeing Bairstow was a lot more involved attacking-wise, playing out wide. And I wonder if that's something that Mowbray will sort of go away and take forward, because maybe that's when he's going to be his most destructive at this stage in his career, when he's not fighting two centre-halves to his back to goal. I wonder if Mowbray will kind of think about that in terms of, all right, maybe I'll let somebody else do that part of the job and see if we get a bit more out of Bairstow in terms of in front of goal. Meander looked really exciting, didn't he? Now, you don't want to get carried away from 5-10 minutes, but my word, he didn't have to strike that ball powerfully. It hit Ruddy in the face. I don't think Ruddy knew anything about it. I think there's a lot at take, but I suppose the other side of it is it reinforces as well what we said for a while, which is that these strikers all benefit from open games when there's a lot of space.
Yeah.
And we saw that again. And it was such a different task to what we saw at Swansea, when we were all a bit frustrated, when it's all about finding that half yard in the box. So I do think it was a game that suited Sunderland strikers. But hopefully, there were definitely good signs. And I think, Rusin has definitely sort of secured his place for after the international break for a little while longer, hasn't he? I think he did more than enough in the game. Obviously got the assist, didn't he, for Job's goal. I think there was more than enough to warrant persisting with him for a little while longer after the international break. I think he did really well, and he deserves at least another start or two.
Absolutely pleasing signs from Rusin. Obviously, Meander coming on for a pretty impressive cameo as well. That was a little mini review of the Birmingham City matchup. We're now going to look at a sort of season review so far. We're about a quarter into the season now. Second international break. So we're going to run through the following categories. We're going to go through our highlight of the season, then our biggest frustration, our favourite goal, our player of the season so far, our young player of the season so far, a player who we want to see more of, and our overall mark for the season so far out of 10. Phil, we will start with you. Which is the highlight of Sunderland's season so far?
Yeah, I think this is a pretty simple one. It's Southampton at home, isn't it? I think not just to beat a team of that stature, to beat them so comfortably, but I think the manner of so many different aspects of the performance. And if I'm thinking specifically, it had already been a pretty much perfect afternoon, and then with a minute or two left on the clock, Bennett does sort of 3 pirouettes, sticks his absolutely inch perfect cross onto Chris Riggs' head, and the 16-year-old scores his first ever championship goal. That was just one of those where you sort of go, this is a ridiculous day. This is a real sort of pinch yourself moment. And I think it was massive for the team as well, in terms of, obviously the season started with 2 okay performances, but 2 defeats. Off the back of what we talked about being a little bit of an unsettling summer with some of the transfer stuff, with not an amazing pre-season. And I think Sunderland did well after those first 2 defeats to steady the ship. And I think Southampton was the game where it then felt like it was going into another gear, and you started to think, you know what? Yeah, we have got a playoff contender here. We have got a side here. It is developing its identity without Stewart, without Ahmad. There's plenty here, and that was a really great afternoon.
That Southampton game as well, Phil, was the first after the transfer window had shut, and there'd been sort of questions on social media from various outlets about Jack Clarke's attitude, and also there'd been the questions over Roberts. Southampton had bid for him, Stewart had left for Southampton. So in the context of that as well, to turn in that performance, it was a real sort of marker, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I mean about it being, the moment at which I think it was the moment at which we moved on from the summer, and some of the difficulties from it. And they're so right to bring up that Clarke example. He scored in him at the first minute, didn't he?
Yeah.
That little header at the back. Big celebration, which, whether or not it is actually true, felt really pointed, felt really, it's okay, I'm happy here. Like, I like playing for this team. Maybe it wasn't that, maybe he was just happy he scored a goal. But I think we all felt that, right? We all felt that it was kind of the team moving forward. And yeah, it's not all been plain sailing since then by any stretch of the imagination. And of course, one aspect of it as well is someone clearly caught Southampton at a good moment, They look a lot stronger now. Their results have improved. Their defensive records improved considerably. And so that's obviously part of it. But yeah, I think that was the day in which we left some of that summer concern behind us, and it felt like we moved into a little bit of a new era. So yeah, that's definitely the one that sticks out for me.
See, I knew you were going to go for the low-hanging fruit, so I've had to get creative here. And I'm sort of rewriting the rule book on what a highlight is, really, but I thought I'd go a bit left field, throw you a bit of a curveball. But the Leicester City performance off the back of 2 defeats, to go there, top of the league, I felt watching that game at that moment that, right, okay, I believe in this team still, and I believe in Tony Mulberry's coaching ability still as well, because they were superb. Arguably should have got something out of the game. Arguably could have got something out of the game had the referee awarded a penalty. We seem to be getting sort of iffy refereeing decisions every week at that point, and still are to a degree. But yeah, similar actually in a way to Middlesbrough last season, where things didn't go Sunderland's way at all, but they just kept on plugging away and kept on working and kept on trying to play. And it's that attitude when things aren't going so well for Sunderland that really shines through, I think. Whereas in previous seasons in League One and the Premier League, we've seen Sunderland fold like a deck of cards at the first sort of sight of any obscurity.
Yeah, I like that. It's a really good shout. The game, and I think I said this at the time, the game that reminded me a lot of was Fulham away in the FA Cup earlier this year.
Yeah.
Where Sunderland, I think it was a 1-1 draw in the end, wasn't it? Someone might correct me if I'm wrong. And yeah, in that game, Sunderland could have lost. Patterson made some fantastic saves. But generally speaking, Sunderland went toe-to-toe and more than held their own. And not doing it by putting 10 men behind the ball and defending for their lives and hoping for the best, by being really aggressive. And the players and the staff spoke about that Fulham game a lot in the final months of the season, about how it gave them that belief that they could go anywhere, impose their style and get a result. And I think I said this at the time, the wins at West Brom away, for example, last year, I think a lot of that was rooted in that Fulham game. And I say that because hopefully the Leicester game has a similar impact this season, because you're absolutely right. Leicester could have got another couple of goals, but Sunderland absolutely could have got something out of that game. And I think as a team and individually, they could all come away and say, you know what, if people are talking about those players as Premier League players and players with big futures, then we should be in that bracket as well. So yeah, it's a really good shout. I enjoyed that game so much, the whole occasion. Leicester's a great stadium to go to, real Premier League feel, and there was a real Premier League feel about the game. So yeah, I'm fully behind you on that shout.
So moving on, biggest frustration. I've got a few contenders for this. Not winning against 10-man Swansea, still feels a little
Yeah.
bit raw because I feel like Sunderland could have got something from that game. The striker wars have been frustrating, but that seems to be sort of ironing itself out now. I mean, refereeing decisions this season really feel like they've gone against Sunderland. The Middlesbrough game stands out as a big frustration, losing that 4-0, but Dan Neil being sent off for dissent. And to keep things on current affairs, Bakuna not getting a yellow card for Birmingham City against Sunderland and Patrick Roberts at the weekend just was completely baffling. So there's a lot to go out there, Phil.
Yeah, I think I agree with the refereeing. I don't really like talking about refereeing, but there is a massive inconsistency this year.
There is.
And I'm not talking about like big decisions. Big decisions can go against you or for you.
I don't think, to be fair, referees is not something we generally talk about on this podcast, but they have cropped up this year.
I think there's an inconsistency about how things are being applied that's really frustrating. And it's not a Sunderland thing either. So you mentioned Bakuna. Bakuna makes 3 fouls that are exactly, to me, the same level of severity and cynicism as Charlie Patino's 2 the week before. Charlie Patino gets 2 yellow cards and sent off. Bakuna makes 3 and doesn't even get a yellow card. And it's just, and then also the dissent. Some weeks we see very, very minor dissent get an immediate yellow card. Other weeks we see outrageous dissent just go totally unpunished. Sometimes you get a yellow card for kicking the ball away. Sometimes players don't get a yellow card even though they clearly kick the ball away to stop the free kick being taken short.
The time wasting stuff, sometimes that's enforced, sometimes it's not.
It's total inconsistency. That's what the frustration's been this year. I'm not going into competence or incompetence because referees are human. It's a fast-paced game. Big decisions will sometimes go your way and they sometimes won't go your way. It's not about that. It's about the fact that we've got completely confused on certain elements. And that is the most frustrating part for me. I'm going to chuck in another couple of frustrations. Cardiff at home, because that felt like a terrible flashback to last season.
Yeah.
Fair play. Cardiff are a good side. They're doing really well this year, but they weren't very good on that day. Sunderland are loads better than them, but couldn't break them down, picked off by a set piece. That felt like so many games last year. Thankfully, and the reason I don't want to dwell on it too much is because Sunderland's home form has improved this year. There have been some frustrations, but generally speaking, Sunderland have been much better, so we shouldn't dwell on that too much. The other one I'm going to chuck in is biggest frustration for me. It's just Dennis Erkin's rotten luck. Whether it's hamstring injuries, whether it's concussion because he puts his head on his line for the team. It just feels like he can't get 10, 15 games in a row. And if there's one thing I would love to see kind of moving forward, because he is a fantastic player, and even in the flashes we've had him this season, you see what he brings to the side, left-footed, aggressive. He's actually really good in the air, so teams can't target him. Gives a lot of Clark on the overlap. It's been really frustrating for me. I'd put Elise in that category as well, but obviously we knew coming into the season that Elise had a fairly serious injury and that was going to take time to develop. But yeah, that's the position of the pitch, which I think ordinarily is a position of real strength for Sunderland. Serkin's rotten luck has been a big frustration for me this season.
It has indeed. Good shots, Phil. The next category is favourite goal. I will let you bat first on this.
Go on, I'll let you go first this time in case I'm Nick.
Well, I've got a few. So obviously Riggs' first goal against Crewe Alexandra in the Cup was good, becoming Sunderland's youngest ever goal scorer. His goal against Southampton was brilliant. Obviously, 16-year-old scoring in the Championship. Huggins against Watford was a superb goal.
Yeah.
The story of that. And from a personal perspective, just because it's a complete vindication for me, Ekwa's 2 goals against Southampton as well were decent strikes. And, he did have a poor game against Birmingham City, to be fair, by his standards. In terms of losing the ball, I do think he did other aspects of the game quite well against Birmingham City, but he did let himself down slightly. But, that aside, that Southampton game felt like a sort of what a player we've got on our hands here. But the Huggins story, which I'm sure you'll come to, Phil, you mentioned on our post-match video after Birmingham City, it is one of the stories of the season, how well he's done.
Yeah, and I think it's something we've talked about. The amazing thing with Huggins is not just that he's playing regularly, but he's actually recaptured, the dynamism of his game, because you never know after the amount of time he's out injured whether that's going to come back. And at the start of the season, we were praising him, and rightly so, because he was playing regularly, he was contributing. But you did feel like he was getting through the games as you would expect. Whereas now he's in the team on merit. It's not because other players are injured. He's in the team because he is fantastic going forward. He gets up and down the pitch. He supports attacks. He can recover quickly and defend well. And that Watford goal embodied that, really. And get it out of the way now. We're both going to pick Jack Clarke as player of the season so far because he is obviously the player of the season so far. But, I'm pleased we're giving Huggins, some love because he is absolutely, if it wasn't for Clarke's ridiculous form, we'd have Huggins right in the conversation as well. And if we should have put story of the season category on, we haven't. But it would either be, I think, Riggs' goal or Niall Huggins' resurgence. Because it's been a real treat. My favourite goal, actually, for this one, I just went purely on the one that got the biggest reaction out of me in the press box, and that was actually Abdullah Bar away at QPR.
Nice.
So, because it was that
one of those you reacted in the press box, Phil. You shouldn't admit to stuff like that.
It would be, do you know what it was? Because I think one of the things about this team is that the pace and the ingenuity with which they play, it can catch your breath sometimes. Yeah. And this is just such a beautiful goal because it's the reverse pass from Pritchard, which nobody sees coming. And then it's Aushish, who we'd not seen anything of up until this point, with his gorgeous cross into the box. And then what a hit from Bart on his weaker foot. It was just one of those goals that just you can't help but just be a little bit breathless. And, and Bar's had a really good season so far. I think we were all a bit unsure when we saw him pre-season that he was going to be playing on the wing. We weren't sure about that decision, but I think Mowbray and his coaching staff have been totally vindicated on that because, I know he's not in the team right now, but he's emerged as a real viable alternative to Patrick Roberts. And in the absence of Ahmad, that was something we were concerned about this year. Obviously, I'm not saying he's on Ahmad's level. I'm not, but his output's been pretty good. And that goal, I just felt that was just such a classic Mowbray Sunderland goal. It was just quality, speed, and thumping volleys are great. They're objectively great goals. Everybody loves them. And that was just a great one because it was a throw in where there seemed to be no threat. And then it's in the roof of the net before you know it, right in front of the away fans, which is always the perfect optics, and especially because QPR is one of those grounds where the away fans are right on top of the goal as well. So, great scenes, really, really great scenes. That's probably my favourite goal in of itself.
No, absolutely. And just quickly go back to Huggins and his story arc at Sunderland. He signed for Sunderland in 2021. He played twice in that League One season, only twice. And then last season, he played once in the Championship. He's already played 12 times this season in the Championship, obviously with his injury issues. So for him to be doing as well as he is after the injury issues and the lack of football, as we mentioned earlier, is mightily impressive. Player of the season so far, pretty easy. For me, I said Jack Clarke, but you could give shout-outs to Patterson, probably Dan Neil, and Trey Hume as well, I think would run Clarke closest for me. I think Trey Hume, over the course of this season, has been sublime.
Yeah, there's only Ballard, I think, that I would add to that conversation as well, to the ones you've said. I think Ballard and Trey Hume pretty similar. They've sort of really, from very good years last year, they've become the established players that you wanted them to be. And they've found a real level of consistency. But it has to be Clarke, right? It's just, it's been a joke. It's been an absolute joke what he's done this season. But I know people, some people from the outside might say, well, he scored 4 penalties. Well, yeah, but he won 3 of them.
You've got to score them, though. Yeah,
you won 3 of them. You've got to score them. And B, if you're the one who's getting fouled because they can't defend against you in the box, then, that's kind of on you as well, He's just such a... I don't think he's barely had a bad game. And
he's already matched his goal tally from last season. This season, he's got 9, which is scandalous, really.
Yeah, and the fact that he's developed his game so much. If you think when he arrived, he used to get a lot of criticism for being predictable because he was always cutting inside on his right foot, and that developed pretty quickly. If you think to that famous goal, as I do very often, where he tees up Patrick Roberts, and he takes the defender by surprise by shimmying down the left. We saw him do that again for Aushish's goal on Saturday.
Yeah.
We're kind of out. We probably shouldn't dwell too long about it because we're kind of out of things to say about Jack Clarke, aren't we? Other than he's brilliant, and it's been an absolute joy to watch him just explode. I think is the right word this season.
And leave him alone in January, basically.
Yeah. If anyone's listening, he's not that good.
That's all that's left to say, really, on Jack Clarke. Yeah, definitely my player of the season. Young player of the season so far. I imagine we've both got the same on this, but I'll let you go first again, Phil.
Yeah, well, this is a really hard one to do, isn't it? Because it's like, what do you class as a young player? Because Sunderland are in like,
Well, I was thinking this
there's
actually
young
does
and
Jack Clark qualify? Because Luke O'Nien
well,
won Young Player of the Season at 24 a couple of years ago, didn't he? Or
yeah,
25,
because
whatever it was.
technically Patterson and Neil would at any other club be in this conversation, but right, I think we both say it's Job, right?
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
guessing,
Job.
I mean,
Yeah.
we all understood the Job signing and that he's a really talented young player. That's what some do. But we were looking at it kind of thinking, well, it doesn't look like it really serves the needs of the team. Well, I mean, Job's performances have spoken for themselves. If you need someone to go up front and try and win headers and stretch the game, he does that. When he's been asked to operate a little bit deeper and show a lot more discipline, he does that. What a fantastic signing he's been. I think there's a few things that stand out with Job. One, which is just I've kind of referred to, his tactical awareness for an 18-year-old is incredible. To be able to play a number of different positions in one game tells you that you can take on a huge amount of tactical information and understand it. His strength for an 18-year-old is insane. It is absolutely insane. What is the thing we always say?
He looks like a full-blown man, doesn't he? He looks like a fully grown man.
Unbelievable. What we often say about 18-year-old centre midfield. Technically he's lovely, but he's got a lot of work to do. Job goes into challenges with 3-4 players and comes out still holding the ball. It's absolutely insane. And that's not to suggest he hasn't got technical ability, because he clearly has a lot of it. But to be physically where he's at now at 18, you are really thinking, where on earth is he going to be in 4 years' time? It is an unbelievable prospect. And I think that, Job is in the team every week and no one bats an eyelid.
I was going to make this point that he's become
story.
I was going to make this point that he's become an 18-year-old first-team regular in the middle for Tony Mowbray, and it's just sort of accepted now, isn't it, that he's a starter? It's almost like he's a senior player. Nobody talks about Job's naivety, after his debut. That talk died down, and let's not forget as well that with those that maybe thought like that this was a slight PR signing with the Bellingham name. Is he going to be as good as his brother? There's not many footballers that are as good as Jude Bellingham, so it's perhaps crass to sort of compare the two. But there was talk that, as you say, did it service the needs of the team? Do we really need Jude Bellingham? Is it just a bit of a sort of fantasy football manager signing? And pretty much instantly, he's put all that to bed. And the exciting thing is, as you mentioned, he's still got some growing and some learning to do, and he already looks this good. It's a very exciting prospect. I guess the question, Phil, which I think we've spoken about in this podcast and has been written about on the Echo website, is that will he need a break at some point, and how does Sunderland cope with that?
Yeah, I'm looking at the under 18s England call up last week, and we should give a shout out. Was it under 19s? Sorry. No, it is under 18s, isn't it? Is it under 18s, under 19s? Sorry, listener. I should have written it down.
Bellingham's anyway, under 19s, I think, isn't he?
Right. So I wanted to give a shout out to Matty Young, who's got his first call up to that England under 19s, a 16-year-old goalkeeper who's going away with Job, which is an incredible achievement. It tells you how talented Young is. But with Job, they're playing 3 games over this international break. And you're just thinking, my God, like, is that what he needs? 3 more games of football? Now, I'm sure he'll be managed closely, but I think because we all remember, it was a season that ended very, very happily at Wembley, but we saw Dan Neil, Dennis Sirkin, Callum Doyle especially, these players did burn out. And we are seeing someone bring Job off pretty much every game after an hour, 65, 70 minutes. And I think at some point he's definitely going to need to come out of the team and have a rest. Because, we don't want to get to... If you look at the schedule for December, it is insane. Sunderland plays so much football, so much travelling. And unfortunately, at some point, Job is going to have to sit out 1 or 2 of these games. But for the long term, he's got a serious future.
He has indeed, and looks like a bit of a bargain, really, for what Sunderland actually paid for him. Player we would like to see more of. I have got 4 players, Phil, for this category. The first is Maenda, just based off that little cameo we saw against Birmingham City. I thought he was hugely impressive, and I'm keen to see more. Chris Rigg, obviously, we've seen a fair bit of, but I'm really keen to see him start. I'm really looking forward to seeing him start. Obviously, that has to be managed. He's only 16 years old. I'm not expecting, 5 or 6 starts to come anytime soon. But when that does happen, I am sort of keen to see what he does on the pitch with more minutes and more responsibility. Rusin as well. I'm enjoying what he is doing, and I'm looking forward to see if he can sort of get on the score sheet and how he develops. In the other, scored against Birmingham City, looks a real player, a real handful. I said on social media afterwards that he was absolutely chomping at the bit to get on, and he absolutely loved it as well. Was Aushish. I thought, yeah, in terms of a substitute performance, he really, really took the game by the scruff of the neck.
Yeah, Aushish was mine. Aushish is the one for me. I think, that QPR game I've already referenced, Bar's goal straight away. The guy's never played with any of these players, and he's just bouncing off them. He's playing little 1-2s with Pritchard. Pritchard's been drawn to him on the pitch because he knows he can play these little combinations with him. Straight away, you're thinking, okay, this is a really good footballer. And he's an interesting one as well, is because I think for obvious reasons, because quite often Sunderland do sign a lot of players at the end of the window, and we sort of put them all in this one category of really, really, really young, untested player. Actually, Aushish has got a huge amount of League One experience. He's played a lot of football, and clearly he wasn't fit enough yet.
In France, that is not in England.
Yeah. Although I wouldn't hold that against him if it was League One. I spent a lot of time there. I've got a lot of respect for it. But no, I think straight away you could just see this was a player of serious caliber. And Mowbray has said that he was going to start at Leicester. Unfortunately, he picked up a little injury, which meant he didn't start that game. But that tells you that he feels he's a really high-level technical player. And it's a position where there's a lot of competition. When you put Dak, Pritchard, and also Rigg coming off the bench as well. When you consider Job as well, as we've just talked about. But I'm really excited to see more of Aushish. He's just one of those players you want to watch. I think Sunderland to find a really good player there, and it's going to be exciting to see how he goes.
Yes, absolutely. Looking forward to seeing a bit more of him. Overall mark out of 10 for the season, Phil. I've put a pretty optimistic 8. I've enjoyed it so far. There was a little bit of a dip, obviously. I think Sunderland lost 3 on the spin, which was unfortunate. But again, I'm really enjoying the development of this team. As you mentioned, players like Neil and Ballard and Hume, who are that year older, who've come to the fore. Huggins obviously breaking out. The Job story's been good to watch. Jack Clark's been electric. I'm hoping that Patrick Roberts can sort of catch fire as well soon, because I think in terms of his output in terms of goal contributions, he's been a bit below par, but he's definitely the same player. I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. So I think, it remains to be seen where Sunderland will finish, obviously, but I do feel like this group under Tony Mowbray and this club in general actually are on the right track.
Yeah, I went for 7.5, and I actually started with a 7, and then that felt really harsh, and then an 8 felt just maybe a little bit too positive, because I think we discussed it. You think back to the Stoke away, which was really disappointing, such a flat performance. Swansea Cardiff at home. You do feel like something have missed some opportunities, but then at the same time, you have to step back. And especially when you consider that uncertainty we had on sort of the very eve of the season, and actually look at it and go, well, we've lost the 2 key players from last year, Ahmad and Ross Stewart. And I know people say Stewart only played 13 games or whatever.
He scored 10 goals.
He scored 11 goals, and that was responsible for a huge portion of Sunderland's points haul last season.
Yeah.
And to have lost those players, and I actually think the team's got better. It might have lost that little bit of stardust, but I think the general structure of the team's improved. And I know we're frustrated about the strikers that they haven't got a goal, but I can see the promise in these players, and I'm really excited that we're less dependent on loan players this season, and that we've actually got some assets that you can grow over time. So I feel really positive about the general direction of the team. I think it's really refreshing when you follow a team to see that it's getting stronger and that certain areas are being addressed over time. So yeah, I feel really positive about it. But in the context of this actual season, I think there have been probably a couple of missed opportunities, and also it's not all about Sunderland; it's about the other teams as well. And I do think some of the teams in this division this year are seriously strong, and that's kind of I think it's going to be difficult for Sunderland to compete higher. But 16 games in, if you said to us on the eve of the season the team would be looking good, they'd be in 6th position.
6 points better off than this stage last season.
Well, there you go. That sums it up. You would have snapped the hand off for it. So I'm going for a very, very good 7.5. Some frustrations along the way, but yeah, pretty exciting times.
Absolutely. Well, 35 minutes there, a nicely lengthed podcast. We'll probably bring it to an end. Phil, thank you for joining us. I hope you achieve your goals with Accrington Stanley on Football Manager 2024. We are not sponsored by Football Manager 2024, and we haven't received any sort of any royalties. But if somebody does want to get in touch,
Yeah, we will be very interested in that, though. So anyone's listening,
yeah, absolutely. Right. Cheers, Phil. Thank you to the listener for listening once again. We are all over everything Sunderland at the Sunderland Echo website. Thank you for listening.